Ken, first thing I do is I hold the slate in. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so here's the slate. Can you see that okay?
I can.
Yeah,
Interview with Eric Ungar, August 1, 2023, 1:30 p. That should be 2:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
Correct. Good. Okay. So camera's rolling. So you know, so I guess you're free to. It's all yours, I think, at this point, Ken.
All right, Eric, you ready?
I am ready.
All right, very good. Shall we start, gentlemen?
Yes.
All right. Eric, thank you for being here today for this interview. Could you start, please, by telling us your name at birth?
My name is Eric Ungar, and my birthday is November 12th, 1926. I was born in Vienna, Austria. That should do it for now.
Is Eric Ungar your full name?
I took on the middle name Edward when we came to this country, and my given name was spelled with E-R-C-H in Vienna. I dropped the H.
Okay. Did you use any other names?
That's the only name that we used.
Okay. And how old are you today?
I am 96.
What were your maternal grandparents' names?
Their last names were Schlesinger. It was Moritz and Charlotte.
Could you spell those, please?
The last name, Schlesinger.
Where were they originally from?
They were from Czechoslovakia or Hungary. That's not clear. My grandfather was born in a place called Radešoc. Don't ask me to spell that one.
All right. What religion were they when they were born?
They're Jewish. They're all Jewish.
Okay. What languages did they speak?
Well, they spoke German mostly. They also spoke a little bit Czech at home.
Can you describe what they were like?
What they were like?
Yes.
Let's see. They were very kind people. I mean, I adored my grandmother, particularly. They were both very common people, I would say. My grandfather worked as a tailor. He had his own little tailor business that he ran out of his apartment. And he took orders for suits and jackets and so on, sold them mostly by hand. And he also had an assistant who came in to help out occasionally. My grandmother was just a homemaker, and she did a good job making a home for her kids and some of us grandkids too.
So your maternal grandfather worked for himself?
Yes.
Okay. Who did he sell his goods to?
I don't know. I think individuals gave him orders for suits and so on. All made to order stuff. Okay. As far as I know.
All right. Thank you. What was your mother's name?
My mother's name was Sabina Schlesinger, of course.
And where was she born?
She was born in Vienna.
When?
I don't know exactly. I can look it up, but I don't have it at my fingertips.
Okay. Did she have siblings?
She did, yes. Mm-hmm.
Who were they?
Let's see. There were several. There was my Aunt Frida, my Aunt Hilda, my Uncle Gus. That's all I remember.
Okay.
There may have been others, but they died young.
What type of education did your mother have?
Did my mother have?
Yes.
Regular grade school education. No more.
Okay. And what was her occupation?
She was a dressmaker sometime, and she worked also in my father's store. I'll tell you about the store later, I suppose.
You can tell us now, please.
Well, my father had a small store that sold spirits and flavorings, and it also had a bar-like arrangements where workmen came in for a shot now and then, and my mother manned that bar, basically.
Okay. What is your strongest memory of your mother?
She was my shield and my daily guide, and was very kind, and sort of protected me from my father's error quite often.
Did your mother have a favorite amongst her children?
A favor what?
A favorite child amongst her children?
I don't think so.
Okay. What was your father's name?
My father's name was Isidore in Vienna. Changed it to Urban when he came into this country.
Okay. He was born in Vienna then?
He was born in a little town outside Vienna.
Do you remember the town?
Yes, it's called Gross Engersdorf.
Could you spell it, please?
Gross, no word, Engersdorf.
When was he born?
Again, I don't remember, but I should know about it. I have it written down, but not at my fingertips.
What was his education?
He went to grade school and to trade school. He apprenticed as a what's it called? Chemist. No, not a chemist. A druggist. Sorry, no. He apprenticed as a druggist.
And that was his occupation?
His occupation essentially was in spirits and essences. Where he sold them, mixed them, and also was a representative for a company based in Vienna.
What is your strongest memory of your father?
He was a strong disciplinarian, and usually pretty much wanted his own way. And of course he was very, very fond of us, of kids, my brother and me.
So you then had one brother?
Correct.
Did you have any other siblings?
Only one brother.
Okay. And what was your brother's name?
In Vienna, it was called Fritz. When he came in this country, he got to be Fred.
And when was he born?
He was born about 5 years after me, on April 3rd, whatever, now 8 years, I don't remember.
Was he born in Vienna too?
Yes.
How would you describe your brother?
How would I describe him? He It was sort of a free soul, a little bit of a cut up when he was little. When he grew up, he sort of went his own way, made his own way, and sort of deviated from some of the family traditions. Started his own business and did very well.
What business was that?
Well, he first had a appliance and furniture business. Then he worked for a travel agency and a marketing agency.
And did those occur while he was in Europe?
So again,
Did he work in those areas while he lived in Europe?
no, he was only like 10 years old when we left.
Okay. Do you know how your parents met?
How they met, I do not know. No.
How did they get along when you were in their home?
They always got along very well. As long as we did what my father said.
When you lived in Vienna, did you live in the same home until you left Vienna?
Basically, yes. When I was born, we lived in one apartment for a short while. I don't remember how long we lived there. Then we moved to the other place. I lived there quite a while. After the Anschluss, we moved into the center city. Let me back up a little bit. We lived in a part of the town called Leopoldstadt, which is where there was a fairly substantial percentage of Jews. And of course, when the Nazis came in, it was not an ideal place to live. So we moved into the center city, which was much a lot less Jewish.
Can you describe each of the two apartments that you and your family lived in Europe, in Vienna?
Well, the first apartment was on a third floor, and it has about 3 rooms and a kitchen, as I recall. My main bedroom, my bedroom, and a spare room that we used for everything else, like dining. And also, when we had the maid, she lived there. No running water, by the way, and no bathroom in the apartment itself. We had to go into the hall and use common facilities. That's the one where we lived in Leopoldstadt. The second one, we lived on the third floor, again, a small apartment that was half occupied by someone else, the owner of the apartment. And yeah, we only had a couple of rooms. We had access to the kitchen there, and again, same bathroom out of the apartment.
And that first apartment you lived in, that was in Leopoldstadt too, or that was elsewhere in Vienna?
The first one was in Leopoldstadt. The last one was in the center city.
What was life? Sorry, strike that. What was it like for you to share a bedroom with your brother Fritz?
No problem at all. We got along very well. He was much younger than me, and I had to listen to somebody was crying and so, but I got used to that. Not a problem.
Okay. How observant was your family when you were growing up?
Marginally observant. We really observed very little. We never went to synagogue, as I recall. Although I was scheduled to have a bar mitzvah in a synagogue, but never got to even studying for that. My father went to on a high holidays, went to the temple and smoked. So that was the extent of our observance. So we were barely Jewish to my mind.
Did you celebrate any Jewish holidays at home?
At home, no.
Okay. When your father went to high holiday services, did you ever go with him?
I never was with him all the time. I occasionally went to visit him while he was there.
And you said in the first apartment you lived in, someone else lived in half of it. Is that right?
No, the second apartment we lived in.
Second. I'm sorry. Thank you. So who lived in that apartment? The second apartment, who lived there with your family?
His name was Glick, and he was the owner of the apartment, actually. And he just rented a part of his apartment to us.
And what was it like, do you remember, to share an apartment with the owner of that building?
No, there was no interference there. And in fact, I got access to his library, and I enjoyed that. So no other problems I can remember.
What schools did you attend in Vienna?
Well, I started off in grade school in Leopoldstadt for 4 years or so. And after 4 years, you quote, graduated, unquote. From there, I went on to what's called the gymnasium, which is a private school supposedly preparing people for university. But after a short time there, after the Anschluss, all the Jewish kids were kicked out of the gymnasium. I was sent for a short time to a public high school, which was not at all demanding. It reminded me of a trade school. But again, sorry, after a short time there, again, all the Jewish kids were kicked out and were sent to a well-known Jewish gymnasium. Gymnasium was run by the Jewish community. But after a week or so, I realized that there's no better place for Nazis to find Jews than to go to a Jewish school. So I quit going to school there. I did not go to school further in Vienna.
So were the schools that you attended in Vienna all secular schools, not religious schools?
They were all secular schools.
So the Anschluss, that happened March 12th of 1938?
Sounds right. Mm-hmm.
Before the Anschluss, what was life like for you and your family in Vienna?
Well, the two phases. Before the Nazi Party was legalized, it was a fairly easy existence, no pressures. I think we were in a somewhat better financial position than most of the working class people who lived in our area. No, I think we were reasonably, at least I was reasonably comfortable and happy. And of course, after the Nazi Party was legalized, a lot of Nazis showed up. I remember well that some kids in our class showed up in Hitler Youth uniforms. I also remember well that someone found a scribbled remark against the Nazis in a bathroom, and we were kept late at night until the parents picked us up. Nobody confessed to that scribble.
Some fellow classmates who showed up in Nazi uniforms in school, was that before the Anschluss or after or both?
That actually was before the Anschluss. After the Nazi Party became legalized, they showed up.
Okay.
But they didn't do much. They acted a little bit high and mighty, but other than that, it kept going the way before.
Was there anti-Semitism that you experienced in Vienna before the Anschluss?
No, not really. Not really. In fact, life was fairly, liberal. I remember playing with some kids in a in a sandbox, and we said, "Well, what are you? You're Jewish, religious, you're now Catholic," and the other kids, it was Catholic. I said it was Jewish. So it doesn't matter. We played. That was sort of the attitude that I perceived.
And then did things change after the Anschluss?
Things changed after the Anschluss. Well, yeah, we were segregated essentially. All the schools were segregated, and that displays it all pretty much.
When you say the schools were segregated, do you mean by religion?
Yes.
So did Jewish and non-Jewish students go to the same school, only they now were in different classes?
Eventually, they went to different schools. They were never, no, they're always in different schools, never in the same classes.
I'm sorry, could you explain that, please?
We're always in different schools, not in different classes in the same school. Is that clear?
I see. And even though those schools were funded by the government?
Yes. One school, the one school, the high school, trade school that I mentioned, that was a city sponsored school. The gymnasium I mentioned was private.
So after the Anschluss, did you start experiencing more anti-Semitism directed at you?
Not directed at me, but in general. Let's see, there was rationing, of course. People didn't sell us any food beyond what's rationing, except one store next to my dad's, where the people continued to sell us milk, and another place where we could get some meat. But the only anti-Semitism I remember really experiencing directly was the fact that we couldn't really talk to other people very well. And another interesting thing is that the SS is the one, I think SS, put up flyers or bulletin boards where they showed all sorts of anti-Semitic papers, including anti-Semitic cartoons. And I remember reading those, and I found them kind of funny. But other than that, I really wasn't scathed much. Although I did notice, and I walked several times. I was walking along the street, and I saw some Jews scrubbing graffiti off the sidewalk, and other people standing around and cheering. I did my best to walk by without being noticed.
And this all occurred while you were in Vienna?
Yes. only Vienna, after the Anschluss.
The bulletin boards that you mentioned that were set up by the Germans, where were they?
They were on the streets, on major streets and sidewalks and so on.
Were bulletin boards like that set up in your school?
No, there were public bulletin boards for the on the street public, I guess.
The few times that you remember anti-Semitism being directed at you, do you remember anyone non-Jewish objecting?
Objecting?
Yes.
I don't think so.
Do you remember anyone who wasn't Jewish who came to your defense whenever anti-Semitic behavior was aimed at you?
No.
Do you know why that was?
Why there was?
Yes.
Why what was it?
Why, when anti-Semitic acts occurred to you, no one non-Jewish came to your defense?
I don't know why that was. I do have a story, though, that that I heard that one of our family friends, my father's friends, had one of his friends was a man who was married to a Jewish woman. And from what he told me, or what I heard from him, was that the SS came in to get that Jewish woman. He defended her, and they killed them.
They killed him?
Yes.
Who killed him?
The SS.
Did they kill him publicly?
No. At least I don't know that. All I know is that story.
Right. Did your parents talk about how life had changed after the Anschluss in your hearing?
They did not talk about it. It was so obvious that there was no need to talk about it.
What about your brother Fritz? Did he say anything about the changes that occurred after the Anschluss?
No, he was really too ill to be conscious of much. He was, by the time he left, he was 10 years old, so he was a little kid.
Do you remember how you felt once the Anschluss started while you were in Vienna?
Well, I felt very threatened, but I was very careful what I did, where I went, and so on. But basically, that's it.
How did you feel threatened? You mentioned a couple examples, but how did you feel?
Well, I felt that I could be set upon at any time. And in fact, one time I was walking along the street, and 2 or 3 tough kids, about my age, came to beat me up, and I sort of ran across the street into an open store, and they did not get in there. So that's the kind of.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, that's all.
The store that you went into, do you know who ran that store?
No, I don't know. No.
Do you remember the name of the store?
It was a toy store. That's all I remember.
When you were growing up in Vienna, both before and after the Anschluss, did you have goals about the future?
Do I have goals about the future?
Your future.
Well, my father decided I was going to be an engineer. And he did. I usually had quite a few mechanical toys, construction sets, and I always took the mechanical toys apart, occasionally put it back together. So he thinks that there was a good talent, I should be an engineer. So my goal was to be an engineer.
Did you object to that at all?
Oh, I thought it was a great idea.
So your family left Vienna when?
About 10 days before my 13th birthday.
So that was in 1936?
Let's see, I wrote down a few dates here, if I can find them.
38 or 39.
Not so easy for me to find, so. I used to be well organized, but not anymore. Here it is. There we go.
You said you came to this country in 39.
Okay, wait a minute. Let's see. We left in October 39, but there's not a story about that that's probably very relevant. The Anschluss occurred on 12 March of 38, and then Kristallnacht was on November 9th, 1938. And by the way, I slept through the Kristallnacht pretty much. There was noise in the street, but I heard very little. Of course, the next day I saw a lot of destruction. But on the 17th of October, 39, we were supposed to report to a central collection state for, quote, colonization of Poland. And the announcement that we have, and I have a copy of it, said that there are no exceptions made except for people who are deathly sick or who have all papers ready to travel. And all the papers, all the passports and authorizations from the Nazi authorities, ship tickets, train tickets, and so on, and affidavits from wherever you're going. Fortunately, we had all these together. So just on the 23rd of October, which is about 6 days after we were supposed to be deported, we were able to leave. That's how we left, essentially.
So you were almost 13 then when you left Austria?
Right. My birthday was on the 12th of November, and we left on the 23rd of October.
Who made the decision in your family to leave?
I'm sure that was a family decision. Of course, most of my parents, my brother and I, were underage.
Do you remember your parents having any kind of conversation before leaving about leaving?
Well, they were certainly anxious for us to leave. They knew there was trouble brewing. They knew essentially we have to leave, basically. It was pretty clear.
You know if your parents spoke with friends of theirs about leaving?
Spoke with what?
What, with friends of theirs about leaving Vienna?
I'm sure it was discussed, but I'm not sure of details.
So did your parents simply one day announce to you and Fritz, we're leaving Vienna, we're leaving Austria?
No. The whole idea developed over quite a long time. It became obvious even to us kids that we had to leave. we went through a lot of machinations to get all the documents together. And certainly we were aware of that. We had to get passports. We had to take on additional names. All Jewish kids who did not have a Jewish sounding name had to take on the name Israel. And I even have a document that shows that I accepted the name of Israel in addition to my given name. So all this developed over quite a while, and it was not a sudden decision.
But they had to have a sponsor, and his aunt was able to find somebody in the U.S. who would guarantee that they would take care of them until they could get settled.
My wife, Goldie, is here, and she's giving me hints here because my memory is not complete. Thank you.
Aside from assembling the necessary documents, do you remember what steps your family took in order to emigrate from Austria?
Let's see, the Jewish community offered retraining classes. So my mother took a class in corset making. My father wrote to everybody he could. He got a New York telephone book and wrote to everybody with the last name as ours. So we're probably not related, but we need help. Can you help? And actually, we got one letter back from a Henry Ungar in New York, who was willing to help, but turned out that his assets were not sufficient enough for the State Department to accept an affidavit from him. So back to the drawing board. Now, fortunately, one of my aunts was able to emigrate earlier. She lived in the Bronx, went to every temple she could find, said there's a family who needs help to get out, and you need somebody with assets. And finally, somebody stood up and said, "Where can I sign?" And he signed affidavit for us. He saved our lives.
You know that person's name?
Oh, yes, Podell. Last name was Podell.
Could you spell that, please?
Podel.
Do you know his first name?
I don't remember that.
So was your family's plan to emigrate from Austria to the United States?
Yes, definitely.
Do you know if your parents planned to move anywhere other than the United States?
I'm not aware of anything else.
Did they need to be sponsored by someone in the United States in order to emigrate to the United States?
Yeah, the sponsor is the person I mentioned before, the one who gave us an affidavit. And he had essentially to certify that he would not let us immigrants be an economic burden in the U.S.
Okay. So you left then Vienna in late October 1939, is that right?
Correct.
How did you travel to the United States?
How? Let's see.
How?
We took a train from Vienna to Rotterdam, and a ship from Rotterdam to New York. Let me just tell a story about also the train trip.
Yes.
When we got on the train, sorry for the interruption.
Hello?
We got on a train again.
Hello?
We caught the train in Vienna, and together with mostly other immigrants, evidently. In a train car, there were various compartments. So, in other words, 6 or 7 seat groups. And as we left Vienna until we came to the Dutch border, nobody said a word. Nobody said a word. My father and others bribed the conductor, essentially gave him all of our German money to keep the inspector who would come on board at the border away from our compartment, and it worked. So after we passed the border between Germany and Holland, everybody started talking. It was like a stone was lifted from our minds. That's it. And then from there, we were put up by a Dutch family for overnight until we got to the ship.
Other than the people operating the train, were all the people who accompanied your family Jewish?
I have no idea. I assume they were all leaving, not to return. I don't know.
And so when you arrived in Rotterdam, in Holland, you then boarded a ship. Do you remember when that was?
When the ship was?
Yes.
I have a ship boarding card. It says 23rd of October. We left 23rd of October 39. We left Rotterdam.
And that's when you set sail from Rotterdam? I thought that's when you left Vienna.
No, that's we left Vienna. I don't have that information. I don't remember how that went. We were supposed to report for deportation on the 17th, and probably left a couple of days later, or maybe the days maybe 2 or 3 days off.
Okay. Do you remember the name of the ship that your family sailed on?
I have a picture of the ship here somewhere. Westerland.
Could you spell that, please?
Westranlund, I think.
Do you remember approximately how many people were on that ship?
No, I don't, but it was a good-sized passenger ship. I'm sure. I'm guessing a couple hundred.
And that ship crossed the Atlantic then to the United States?
Yes.
Do you remember if it berthed anywhere between Rotterdam and the United States?
If the ship anywhere else?
Yes.
I don't think so.
And how long did it take you to cross the Atlantic?
It took about a week.
And what were conditions like on the ship?
They were actually very nice. We were treated like people. Nobody harassed us. We had reasonably good food in the dining room. We were treated like holiday passengers in a way. So
Would you say you were treated like human beings?
Yes, compared to what it was before we left.
So how did that feel compared to what life was like for you in Vienna?
It was like a breath of fresh air.
Did you hear the same thing from your parents and from Fritz?
I can't say I heard it, but I saw you got the impression.
So is it fair to say you arrived in the United States approximately October 30th of 1939?
I think so. Again, I have the exact dates in some documents that I have.
Do you know where the ship landed in the United States?
It was New York or Brooklyn, somewhere.
So when you arrived, did your family then have to go through Ellis Island?
We did not. No, we went to a reception area in the Bronx and were released from there.
And who hosted that reception area? Do you remember?
Who hosted it, I don't know. But we were met there by my aunt and uncle who had emigrated earlier.
Mm-hmm. Did the Joint Distribution Committee have any hand in helping your family once you landed in New York?
I don't know that. I know we were supported by some sort of agency, and who also arranged for us to leave New York after a while. I don't know the name of the agency, but we did have help.
And so approximately how long were you in New York?
Couple of months, probably.
Did either of your parents work during that month while you were in New York?
No.
So after that, did someone suggested or directed that you go elsewhere? Is that right?
Yeah, again, it was the same agency that whose name I don't remember, arranged for us to move. They said they wanted not all Jews to remain in New York. I probably didn't phrase it very well, but they didn't want. They wanted to get some of us Jews out of New York. It was a Jewish agency, but it's not anti-Semitic, and they arranged for us to move to Cincinnati. The funny thing about the story is that we got the wrong tickets, and we wound up in St. Louis. And again, fortunately, St. Louis were met by a Jewish agency, and they put us up for a short while. And got it. Okay. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
Well, that agency helped us get settled. They paid for us for a short while till we found work. And so we owe a lot to that agency.
So how long then did your family live in St. Louis?
How long? A long time. I lived there until I got married, and my parents lived there till they died. So quite a while. They stayed in St. Louis.
And let me ask, the members of your family who went from Westerbork in the Netherlands to the United States, was it just your parents, your brother Fritz, and you?
I don't quite understand your question. Try again.
Who in your family crossed the Atlantic to go to the United States?
Who? I don't.
Your parents and Fred.
Well, I'm not sure. I answered the question.
Let me ask this. Did your grandparents die before you left Vienna to go to the United States?
My father's parents died when I was very young. My mother's parents stayed in Vienna.
Do you know why they stayed?
They could not leave. They did not get a sponsorship on time.
Okay, we will get to them in a little bit. So when your parents and you and Fritz arrived in St. Louis, what did your parents, what was their occupation?
Well, since my father was a trained pharmacist, he did chemical work. He first found a job in a electroplating firm, and that did not work out too well. He was very unhappy there. And after that, he found a job as a chemical technician at Anheuser-Busch, the famous beer company. And he stayed there until he retired. My mother took in sewing at home for private patients, for private customers.
So, what did you do once you arrived in St. Louis? Did you go to school?
Yes, I first went to grade school. In Vienna, grade school was 4 years. In the U.S., it was 8 years. So I went to the 8th grade essentially, I graduated after a couple of months. I learned English a lot better than I did before, and from there I went to high school.
And this was in St. Louis?
In St. Louis, yes.
And when did you graduate from high school in St. Louis?
January 44.
And what about Fritz? What school did he go to?
He went to the same grade school. He stayed longer, and then also went to I think he went to the same high school.
No, he went to Soldan.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Went to a high school next to the one I went to.
When you graduated from high school in 1944, did you continue your education?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What did you do?
Well, let's see, the top graduates in high school were offered a half tuition scholarship at Washington University. And that enabled me to start college. So I went to Washington University there.
And what studies did you pursue there?
Well, I started off in chemical engineering and stayed there for maybe not quite a year, less than a year. Then I turned 18 and got my induction notice. After that, I finished half the semester and then taken the Army. And I found out that I couldn't really be drafted since I wasn't a citizen, and I volunteered.
And that was for the U.S. Army?
The U.S. Army, of course.
When you volunteered, how did your parents respond?
Yeah, they didn't like me going to the Army, but there was no choice anyhow.
So those first 5-6 years that your family was in the United States, did your parents express gratitude for having been allowed to come to the United States?
No question. No question.
How did they express it?
Well, they talked about it all the time, and they essentially joined with other families that were immigrants, and they said how lucky they were and so on.
Who were their friends in St. Louis? Were they Jewish? Were they non-Jewish? Were they a mix?
They were mostly Jewish and a large fraction immigrants, fellow immigrants.
And so, how did they socialize with them?
Got together for coffee and card playing and visiting back and forth. And went to parks together. That's all I know.
So you sold newspapers when you were growing up.
That's another story.
Did they form or joined social organizations, like organizations that were founded by those who immigrated?
I'm not aware of any.
Who did you play with during the time that you were in St. Louis before you enlisted?
Well, let's see, in grade school, I had a couple of friends who were Boy Scouts. I also joined the Boy Scouts. In high school, I made friends with quite a few of my schoolmates. And we were on teams together and traveled together and so on. So there were kids from all walks of life, very small fraction Jewish, mostly non-Jewish, because that was the local demographics. That should answer the question.
When you immigrated to the United States and during that time until you enlisted, were you glad to be in the United States?
Was I glad to be? No question. Yes, indeed.
Were you thankful to be in the United States?
Yes, indeed.
Was your feeling grateful and thank you, did that in part affect your decision to enlist in the Army?
Not really. Not really. I just thought it was my time, my thing to do.
So tell us, please, about your service in the Army.
Well, let's see. I went through basic training, and after a couple of months in the basic training, several of us were sent to Camp Hood, Texas. After a couple of months there, several of us were told to get on a truck and go to the Belton, which is the county seat of that area, for naturalization. So it turned out all the kids on the truck were non-citizens. So in Belton, Texas, we were sworn in and got our citizenship. So I consider myself a naturalized Texan. I tell everybody. Well, near the end of basic training, I learned about the fact that you could apply for officers candidate school. So I decided if any fool's going to tell me what to do, I'm going to be that fool. So I applied for officers candidate school, and I was accepted. After I went through some quizzing about how I felt about the Germans and Austrians and so on. I was then discharged as a private, sent off to officers candidate school in Camp. What was it? What's the name of it? Anyhow, I'll think of it after a while. And I went through officers training. Your pictures went out. Does that mean anything? The video just went out?
No. Oh, on the Zoom?
Yeah.
Did it?
Hang on.
Yeah. Is it a power thing?
It shouldn't be. You should have power. Let's see here.
Okay, Mom?
Should that be lit? Is it a power indicator light?
Yeah.
It's dim.
Yeah. This is here. Okay.
There you go.
There we go. Might have run off battery for a while. There we go, moment, right? Just take a minute for it to.
How about a glass of water? You thirsty or anything?
I think I need a stretch.
Watch, we'll get for him when you get up.
Yeah.
You okay?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I think your glass of water's on the table in the kitchen.
Some water here too.
Yeah, nobody uses them, I think.
Sorry about that.
This is worse than
What?
this is worse than giving testimony in a witness. stand.
Oh yeah. I bet. Do you feel like you're being interrogated?
Yeah.
You know. Where were you on the night in question?
You lost contact.
Yeah.
Stand by.
I can't believe it was.
There we go.
Kim?
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry about
Hi.
that. We lost you for a sec, but it was on our end.
Okay, we're back.
We're back.
To bring it.
Okay. Somebody's partly obstructing the camera.
Yes, we know that. We know that. That's me.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
It's solving the laptop issue and bring your boom down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, are we good to go?
Yep, we're good there,
Yeah.
Tim.
Yeah.
Oh,
Still
yeah.
rolling.
Still rolling.
Good, thank you.
We got about
So
40
have
minutes.
You
I've
then
just
signed
can't-
up for officer training school in the U.S. Army?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Try again.
You signed up for officer training school while in the U.S. Army?
Of course, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. When was that?
I'd like to know that. Yeah. I don't know that. I know the exact date. Let's see. I was inducted on 20 January 45, and it was in until 18 March 48, and then in the reserve until 14 November 51. I don't quite know when I finished or when I started OCS. I finished it. I have documentation, but not with me.
Was the Army aware that you were fluent in German at that time?
That I was what?
Fluent in German?
Trained in German.
No, if you were fluid.
Well,
That you could speak
it
German.
really didn't come up until a little bit later.
How did it come up?
Well, short time before I finished officers training school, VE Day occurred, and shortly after there was the opportunity for people to volunteer to go to Germany for graze registration, whatever that was. And since fighting was going on still in the Pacific, I thought it was a wonderful opportunity. And of course, my German helped there. And I'm not sure it made a lot of difference because they did accept me, and I was shipped. Then, after my graduation, I was sent to Germany.
So you were assigned service in Germany right after the end of World War II in Europe?
Yes.
What did you do then once you arrived in Germany?
Well, I was assigned to graze registration, which means that we were searching for deceased American soldiers and to identify them and essentially exhume them, put them into caskets essentially, and ship them back to the U.S. That was our job.
How did you feel about the work you were doing?
I was not crazy about this, but on the other hand, I was happy that I could use my German skill to help get information that other people could not get from the locals.
And so that other information, did you interview local Germans?
Yes,
about the
yes.
war?
In all cases, where we went to a local cemetery where their Americans were buried. By the way, earlier teams had identified locations where Americans would be buried or likely to be buried, and we went to all those cemeteries and talked to the proper people. And again, there it was very useful, or it was almost necessary for me to speak German. I interviewed all the people that in the cemeteries and of the small towns. I interviewed the mayors and other officials I could find. Let me just tell you one story that sticks with me. That in one little town, we went to a cemetery to exhume a buried American, and asked the people how he got there, a local person how he got there. So, well, the woman there told me that 3 Americans had been shot down when the airplane had been shot down. 3 came down in the parachute, and 2 of them they turned over to the local militia. The 3rd one, she said, they look Jewish, so naturally we kill them. Just like you say, you squash a bug. And that stays with me. And that was pretty much the attitude that some of the Nazis had, I'm quite sure.
When you heard that from that person, about the 3rd person was Jewish, so of course we killed them, how did you feel?
Like I feel now.
Which is?
Yeah, there's nothing I could do, nothing that I could do except accept it at the time. Since the moment I talked to did not do the killing, I didn't know who did the killing. Nothing to be done about it. Actually, the situation in that part of Germany was precarious at best. It was not a Russian-occupied zone. In fact, we always had a Russian officer or 2 with us for liaison. So any action would have to be taken by them, and they were not doing anything in that score.
How did you feel about an Austrian Jew who left Austria in late October 1939 to return to Europe soon after the end of the war in Europe? How did you feel about being there?
I think it's kind of strange that people will go back to places where not wanted. However, after many years, and we went to visit Vienna a few times, a new generation had settled in, and had reasonably nice lives, reasonably good Jewish lives, in fact. We were there one time, and I'm not quite sure when it was. First time, you know. There were more kosher restaurants in Vienna than there are in Newton.
No, that was our third trip there.
Yeah, no, that was.
Yeah, when we were there with the Greens.
Okay, that was later than I thought it was. Okay. That should answer that question, I suppose, well.
Well, you said it felt strange to be there.
You know, it was strange to me that people would move there. But they did. You know, for a long time I could not accept that they would do that. But after many years, Vienna became a normal city. The local populace accepted the situation. They built Holocaust memorials. They refurbished synagogues, and there are more Jewish people. There are more Jewish lives.
So while you were serving in the U.S. Army in Germany, and you started to see Jews returning to Germany and to Austria, did you have any desire to move back?
Never. While I was serving in Berlin, there were no Jews moving back anywhere. During that time, there were no Jewish researchers anywhere in Germany or Austria.
When you visited Vienna several times while you were in the service, did you feel like you had returned home?
The landscape was very familiar. I could find my way around the city like when I was little. I visited the house where we lived, the house where my grandparents lived, where our store was, and where my uncles and aunt lived. And I tried to speak to as many people as I could. In fact, I went into my grade school. Into my grade school. It was still a school. It was not a high school, but anyhow. So I went in and, in fact, talked to the headmaster there. As a child, I would never have done that, but anyhow, here I was in an American uniform going into the headmaster, and he got a bit scared. I told him who I was, told him my teacher's name, and I was very welcome then. And the headmaster then told me about the teacher I had in the grade school. We had one teacher for 4 years. He evidently joined the Nazi Party to be, to advance and get to be a big deal in the old Vienna school system. Let's see, what else can I tell you? Well, the places where we lived looked very decrepit. It hadn't changed much. I did speak to the people who had the store next to us, who had a dairy store, who sold us milk when she was supposed to. And again, I walked in with my uniform, and the same woman was there running the store. And she again got scared because she saw me in uniform until I told her who I was. And she gave me a hug. No. And I exchanged addresses for him and had her correspond with my parents. Other things, I went to an apartment where my uncles and aunts lived. Went to the apartment, somebody else was living there, didn't know them. That's pretty much the story, I guess.
Is it fair to say that you had mixed feelings being back in Austria?
Mixed feelings. Yeah, I certainly not considered my home. I considered it very familiar. In fact, I knew some things, knew some areas that the locals did not. Some younger generation didn't know some of these things, some of the local landmarks and so on. But it wasn't home anymore.
Yeah. Let's go back a little bit to soon after your family arrived in the United States. You mentioned before that your family started receiving letters from relatives in Europe. Is that right?
No, well, I'm not sure you said it, but ask again.
Once your family was in the United States, did they start receiving letters from family members in Europe?
Oh, yes. They had pretty good correspondence with some of my uncles and aunts, and also with my mother's parents, at least until they were sent off.
Sent off where?
Well, my grandfather and grandmother were sent to Theresienstadt, and my grandfather died there. In fact, I have his death certificate because we visited there sometime later, and it had a typical German efficient catalog there. So I got a copy of that. My grandfather died there. My grandmother was sent to Auschwitz. That's all we know of that.
And were these your maternal or paternal grandparents?
Sorry, say again?
Were these your mother's parents or
My
your
mother's
father's
parents. My mother's parents. My father's parents died long before the Auschwitz when I was very young. I hardly knew them.
Okay. And do you have some of the letters that you received from relatives in Europe?
Yes, I had a collection of letters that my parents and I received, mostly my parents, from my uncles and aunts and from my grandparents.
These were letters that received during the war?
Say again?
These were letters your parents received during World War II from those relatives?
I think that war was still going on. Yes.
Okay. Do you have some of those letters with you today?
I don't with me. I have a collection of them that I donated to the Holocaust Museum. And I had copies here, which I desperately looked for, but before this interview, but I couldn't find them.
Okay.
I have all those other documents that I couldn't find, and I have no idea where they are.
Do you remember what those relatives wrote to your parents in those letters?
Oh, they were a lifeline, you know. They let my parents know that they were still alive, and they also told my parents and me more or less what's going on in sort of disguised language, you know. And they had their own keywords. When they said Mr. Grimm came to see them, it means that one of our better off aunts and uncles came to see my grandparents, gave them some money, that kind of thing. mostly they described the situation in guided terms.
Did they ask your parents for help?
They did. Well, my parents and others who were with us were always anxious to help and tried hard to help. They didn't have to ask. They know where they're getting it. They know they're trying to get it.
Were your parents able to help those family members?
They were not able to help. My uncles and aunts were able to send some money, and they were trying to get visas for them, but they couldn't do that on time. On time means before they were sent off.
Did you read any of these letters?
Did I read any of the letters?
When they were received by your parents?
At the time, only some. I think I probably had read all of them, but they came very sporadically, so I don't remember. On the other hand, the collection I have is this thick, a collection of letters.
So did you read some of them between 44 and 45?
Yes, of course.
And how did you feel about what you were reading?
Well, it was upsetting, but somehow I was pretty young and innocent and didn't feel too touched and too involved at the time. My feeling was that all the adults in the family would be doing what they can. There's nothing I can do, so just back off.
Did you feel helpless?
Sort of,
Did your parents feel the same way?
They felt pretty desperate.
How do you know that?
How do I know that?
Yes.
They talked about it. They talked, especially with my aunt in New York, who got us the affidavit. They were always talking back and forth and so on. And in fact, one of the distant relatives had come to the States much earlier and got this naturalized. They were trying to get an affidavit from my grandparents, and again, they didn't get it done on time. And all that was discussed in the letters.
Did any of your family members in Europe survive World War II, aside from your parents and you and Fritz?
There were others who emigrated. I mentioned this one uncle and aunt who left before we did, who got us the affidavit. I had a surviving aunt and a cousin who wound up in Britain, in Leeds and in London, and another set of uncles and aunts who also wound up in London after wound up in Denmark eventually. And I had a cousin who also came about the same time as we did. So they did survive. I think all the cousins in my generation, the few I had, survived.
How many?
Well, let's say I had 1, 2, 3.
3 out of how many?
Do I name it for you?
Yes, please.
Okay. Henry Krause was my little cousin. And there was Annie Cohn, the one that went to England, and Ernst Fleischmann.
And those three survived. How many approximately did not survive?
How many did what?
How many of them did not survive?
I don't understand what you said.
How many did not survive?
How many did not survive? No, all those three survived.
Right. Aside from them, how many family members did not survive the war?
Well, I never counted them, but I have uncles and aunts who did not survive. And of course, grandparents did not survive. That's all we really had.
So, your service in the Army, when did that end?
Let's see, according to what I looked up recently, active service ended in March 48, and my reserve service ended in November 51.
Okay, and after March of 48, did you return to the United States?
Well, by then I was back in the United States.
Okay. And so you got married after you returned to the United States, soon after?
Yes, soon after
And
graduating
that was-
college.
Say again, please.
Soon after graduating college, not right after I got back.
Okay. And when did you graduate college?
In 51. And we got married in January 51. If I don't know that I get hit. 1st of July
And so
51.
you married Goldie?
Yes.
What is her full name?
Full name was Becker. Last name was Becker. Goldie Becker. Goldie Edna Becker.
Right.
And did you know her before college?
No, I met her at the end of college, or
You met me when you got back.
when I
from
got there.
service.
Yeah. I was still in uniform when I met her.
And how did you meet?
On a blind date. Goldie's cousin had a date, and they needed somebody somebody with access to a car to join them. I had my father's car, so I was invited. That's how I got to Goldie. It was the most expensive car ride I ever had.
Okay, and so you got married then 52?
No.
51.
51. All right. And do you have children?
Yes, we did. We are blessed with 4 children, four daughters.
Can you tell us their names, please?
They're all married now. The oldest is Judith Fishman. Number 2 is Susan Green. Number 3 is Ellen Organish. I dare you to spell that one. And our baby is Sharon Lane.
Okay, and those 4 children there, you had them over approximately an 11-year period?
Sorry?
Your 4 children, what's the difference in their ages?
I differ with my wife. The oldest now is 70, and the youngest is
60.
60.
Yeah, she was 10 and a half when Sharon was born.
So 10 years difference.
11-year period.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to have children?
We wanted children. No reason.
Did you find that in a way it was having children would be to have revenge over what the Germans did to the Jews?
That was not my motivation, but I'm very happy that happened for the same reason.
And you're close with all four of your children?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. Eric, do you want to take a short break, or are you good to keep going?
I think a break would be about a good idea.
To take a break?
Sure. I have some documents. Maybe
Okay.
maybe when they picture the documents, while during a break, or whatever we want to do.
Sure. I'll have a few more questions for you after the break, and then let's go through those documents then. Is that okay?
Okay. The documents are rather random things I happened to find.
Camera's rolling. So we're back up rolling, Ken?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Eric, you said you have 4 daughters.
Correct.
Do you have any grandchildren?
We have 10 grandchildren and 14 great-grandchildren.
And that's okay?
My hearing is not good, so I'm sorry.
It was a throwaway question. I presume you're very happy about having 10 grandchildren and 14 great-grandchildren.
That's a rhetorical question. Obviously, I'm very,
Yes.
I'm delirious.
Have you spoken before about your experiences before and during World War II?
Well, I was interviewed by the Leo Beck Institute some time ago.
How long ago was that approximately?
How long ago? Perhaps 7, 10 years, somewhere at that time frame.
Other than that interview by the Leo Beck Institute.
How did it do it? They sent a representative.
Oh, go ahead.
There was no video recording. It was only on the tape.
In the last 10 years, have you talked with many people about your experiences before and during World War II?
Not with many. There were several Holocaust celebrations or remembrances at our temple, and others that I spoke about experiences.
Is it a subject for conversation with your daughters or your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren?
They know the situation, but we don't talk about it a lot. It's not a thing that's at the top of our minds, except sometimes during high holidays, or we're going to try to remember our family members.
Could you describe how the Shoah changed you?
Well, I guess one change is that when all the Jews were persecuted, and I was not at all religious, so I decided, well, I have to find out what this is all about. And I started reading everything I could find, and became more religiously oriented. That's basic it. And I also try to get more lenient with people, try to understand what their background is, and how they developed, what they were taught, and so on. You know, I spoke with many Germans while I was stationed in Berlin, for instance, and found out how they felt about the situation. And I realized they were not all devils. Some were just sucked in by the situation. Some objected. So they were all humans. So that realized that.
And realizing that, what did that mean to you?
was it mean to me? I'm not sure. It just changed my outlook.
Changed it. What I'm asking is, it changed your outlook to what?
Well, to be more open and more tolerant. And then you look at background a little bit more and just take people as at face value.
When you arrived in the United States, what did you expect your life would be like in the United States?
I had no idea, actually. I think that's a very honest answer. I just went along with it with the tide.
When you arrived, did you have any plans for yourself?
Personally, not. No. I was only 13 almost.
Maybe this is the last question before we go through the documents you have. Do you have any message for anyone who's watching this interview in the future?
I can't like a prophet or a wise person, but the important thing is to be vigilant and not to take people at their face value, avoid stereotypes, know what you're doing, know with whom you're doing it, to whom you're doing it. So I really haven't thought about this very much.
Okay, but the things you just named, Eric, are those things that you've tried to put in practice in your own life?
Of course.
Okay. Shall we look at the documents you'd like to share with us?
Yes. As I said before, there's sort of a random collection of what I found. It may or may not be entirely relevant, but there are a couple things that I would like to show. This is very poorly legible, but it is the actual notice of our reporting for transportation to Poland.
That was in October of 1939.
There.
Was that issued in October of 1939?
Yeah, 17 October 1939. It says. That was issued.
Jim?
Yeah, can we are we going to shoot this separately as a cutaway? Because I have a prime lens now on. I don't have a zoom lens on.
But it's obviously German. It's very poorly legible, and there's also a piece that they tore off, and this tells you that we had to report to a certain collection place, certain time, certain place, and to bring with us the following things for what they call, quote, colonization of Poland. And those things include two warm changes, a winter coat, a raincoat, two sets of heavy shoes, earmuffs, handkerchiefs, any tools you may have, and so on. It's a very, I'm not sure they're right, but it strikes me as very, very hard-nosed and very deceiving to where the people went. And I think some of the things you see in Auschwitz and so on are things that people actually brought them along based on things like this.
And who again, Eric? Who again issued that notice?
This was issued by the Jewish Community Center upon the orders of the Nazi regime.
And do you remember how it was delivered to your family?
How what?
Do you remember how it was delivered to your family?
I don't know. Possibly by mail. I don't really know.
Okay. Tim, did
By the
you
way,
want
it
to-
also says the only exception to this is if you're deathly sick, or if you have together all possible documents for immigration to some definite place. So fortunately, we fell into the latter category, and that's how we're able to leave.
Eric, did that say where in Poland you were going, or just to Poland?
Oh, it says, I think, no, only to colonization in Poland. In fact, it doesn't even say Poland, it says colonization.
Did it say colonization in the East, in the general government, to Ostpoland? Did it say anything like that?
It doesn't say where, it's just colonization.
But you considered that, Eric, in hindsight, to be a very dishonest directive?
Well, yeah, it's colonization. It means that you're going to work there, evidently. And of course, being displaced and going to work there is bad enough. But the fact that once you got there, you didn't live there very long, that doesn't appear anywhere here.
Jim, did you want to get a shot of that?
Well, is that something that we would do against Duvetine after we're done with the interview? Should we just let Eric continue to?
Okay.
And then
Thank you.
then you can cut to it.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. That's it. I happen to have the documentation from the Red Star line in Holland indicating that we were scheduled to go on the Westerland on 23rd October 29. I'm not sure that's of interest, but to me it is. This is the order to my father of Aryanization of his business. In other words, I know it was one day, a guy in a Nazi uniform came in, asked for the keys for the store, and told us out. And the store was now his. That's Aryanization.
And Eric, did Aryanization mean that the ownership of the store and its contents was being transferred to somebody else?
Transferred to an Aryan, yes.
And do you know if your family was paid anything as part of this so-called Aryanization?
Nothing at all. And in fact, at the same time, they asked for anything we had with us, like any jewelry or any valuables and so on. Let's see. What else I have? I have several pages from my mother's passport, mother's German passport when we left, showing that she took on the additional name of Sarah, like all Jews had to take on a Jewish name. So her name was Sabina, and here it shows that Sarah is carroted in. Another page of the passport shows our authorization by the Vienna police office, and final. Another page shows that there were 2 children with my mother on the same passport. What other goes I have here? I had my Austrian citizenship from when I was little. I think that's about the only thing I could put my hands on. Oh, yes. This is a copy of my grandfather's death certificate from Theresienstadt, from the archives of Theresienstadt.
Eric, a question. Did you receive that after the war or during the war?
Oh, no, much after the war. When we went to visit Theresienstadt on one of our trips to Europe, we stopped at Theresienstadt, and I looked for the graves of my grandfather. Obviously couldn't find them, but they do, like good organized Germans, they have a very nice archive there where I got this from.
And the person who gave your father's death certificate, sorry, your grandfather's death certificate to you, did they say anything to you? Or sorry, did they say anything to you when they gave it to you?
No, nothing at all. The person was their clerk. She was looking at the files and making copies. But the death certificate is signed by a doctor, supposedly, who certified his death and the cause,
I'm sorry, I meant to say your grandfather. Sorry.
My grandfather, you're right.
Do you have any others you wanted to share?
I think that's all I have handy, unfortunately.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Anything else I want to what?
Is there anything else you wanted to say to tell the future?
It's hard. I've only said everything I think I have to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We hope this doesn't happen again. Unfortunately, we see it happening all the time, still everywhere. And unfortunately, people have not learned a lesson. And we see it over and over again. I wish people would learn the lesson. That's it.
Okay. I thank you very much for your taking the time and effort to do this. I know the USC Shoah Foundation appreciates it as well. Jim and Tim, thank you very much for your work. But Eric, again, especially, thank you for your willingness to do that. It's most appreciated.
I'm happy to have had the opportunity.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
I'm going to cut.
It's not. It ain't over till it's over. And that, I mean, they were going to, I mean, they, like I said to Andy, left hand doesn't know what right hand's doing. They could lose 3,000 people, and it would make it run more efficiently.
You misplaced all the letters that you had, Eric?
That's among the stuff that's missing. I couldn't find. I have no idea where they might be.
6 weeks from now, you'll be going through the garage or whatever and go, oh my God, there it is.
Well,
I've been looking for that. I wish I had that.
we don't have a garage.
but or the basement or whatever.
I looked at every closet, every room that we have. So.
He has an office and he has all his stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But also I looked in every other room too. Everywhere.
Yeah. What used to be the nursery became his office after he retired,
Yeah.
and became. Older, you know, in case there was still him to come in the back door.
The after gap is quite a while.
Yeah, because I didn't want him to walk in when they were in the middle of something. Is he going to take a picture of the picture?
Well, that's a good question.
That help?
Yeah.
It'd be better served if I
No, you're good. You're okay.
stood there.
So, yeah, we're help the flare in the camera a little bit. I mean the lens.
Yeah. What's that? Any better?
Yeah.